And now,
it's 10 a.m.
Let's just get down to it.
And it's time for your sports fix.
Strap yourselves in, folks.
From two guys who have covered the teams you're passionate about for years.
We are professionals.
This is Jake Scott and Ben Anderson on 97.5 The KSL Sports Zone.
Jake and Ben, 97.5 The KSL Sports Zone. A very happy Friday to everybody out there. Got a big show for you today. We're going to have Tim LaComb going to join us right here out of the gate. Get a breakdown on the latest with the Utah Jazz, including last night's loss to the Portland Trail Blazers and a somewhat shocking, in my opinion, $500,000 fine for resting Jaren Jackson Jr. and Lauri Markkanen in the fourth quarters of games in Orlando and Miami. I will talk more about that coming up at 11 o'clock. And at 11:30, former Utah women's head basketball coach Elaine Elliott will join the show. She is being honored tomorrow and with a banner up at Huntsman Center. So we will talk to Elaine coming up then at 11:30. But yeah, wild news last night for the Utah Jazz and a bizarrely sour turn after what I think, going back to last Tuesday before the trade deadline when the Jazz acquired Jaren Jackson Jr., as exuberant as I think fans were between Tuesday and Wednesday, not 24 hours, but a 8-day stretch, a lot of that goodwill was undone last night with what happened with the NBA and the Jazz getting fined, and now how they're going to feel over these last few games going into the end of the season and eventually the lottery in May. So let's welcome in our next guest. You can catch him on Utah Jazz pre-half and post-game shows with Jake Scott. It is Coach Tim LaComb. What's going on, Tim?
Hey, Ben. How are you?
I'm doing terrific. Thank you for jumping on. First of all, I guess let's address the fine. Let's address the $500,000 fine. The NBA did, quote-unquote, drop the hammer on the Jazz. That's one of the bigger fines I remember, especially when it comes to tanking. That was very aggressive.
Yeah, it was really aggressive. And the only thing I can say is that, I've been sitting in the chair watching 82 games a year for 6 years. And, I just think it's rich, because this is not something new. And obviously what the league's in this instance is trying to do is, I guess, decide who you're going to play and when. I mean, it just gets into some crazy stuff, especially given the history of the league, how Oklahoma City is where they are. And so I just find it all pretty rich. And, I'm just like, I love that there's actually some dialogue and some pushback because I think that's where you get change.
I'm like you. I mean, I watch the league every night, just like you. I've watched every Jazz game for 15 straight years. I watch a lot of games on my off nights. I think there's no doubt that tanking is a problem. I don't think that's anybody's argument. I think it, and I don't actually have a problem with the NBA starting to enforce rules now that they didn't previously enforce. Like, at some point, if you want to make a change, you just have to say today's the day we're going to start. I just wonder if the NBA is really willing to throw down the gauntlet and start punishing every team that, quote unquote, has the intent or goes into a game with the intent of not winning, because that's every Sacramento Kings game for the rest of the year. I mean, that's every Dallas Mavericks game for the rest of the year. That word intent was really, it's carrying a lot of weight. And I hope, honestly, that Adam Silver enforces it if that's the line he's going to draw in the sand.
For sure. And the other thing is I really do believe that, everybody's trying to do it their way, but I really actually love the way the Jazz through this time have developed players, which was the goal, and the fact that Will Hardy, and you've seen this, Ben, he'll start guys, that deserve to start through their work, and giving them that opportunity. He'll bring guys in and close games that's not their role per se, but that's happened a lot over the last 4 years. And I think the biggest thing is I just believe that a coach knows his team, and like the whole idea of a minutes restriction for Lauri that night. I mean, that's the part of this that is, it's kind of overreaching, I think, from a league standpoint, because the coach still got to be able to coach his team, and you've still got to have a plan to execute. And everybody knows what's going on anyway. I mean, it's not like it's like the old before NIL. You know what schools had a bag man, and if you look really closely, you'll see some schools that have dropped off from their future or their past time, and they're not doing as well now. So the bottom line is, again, this has been going on forever, and it's just as you said, a huge fine to bring down on a team as if they're the first team to ever have situations where they're trying to develop young guys, and then in the interim, get better by getting a better pick.
Now, Jazz fans don't need to own this. Now, Jazz fans they wear their team's jersey proudly, and it's a personal matter with Jazz fans, and that's the truth with every fan in every state. But I do think this does put a bizarre and almost picked on feeling for Jazz fans after what had been a really fun week. The tanking has been horrible. The rebuild has been horrible. It's been difficult for fans to watch. I think they finally feel like there's some things breaking their way. Jaren Jackson Jr. comes to Utah, seems excited about being here, seems to work really well on the floor right away. And now the NBA seems to be nitpicking what the Jazz are doing. And I think that is going to put a sour taste in Jazz fans' mouth down the stretch of the season. And I think that's unfortunate.
It will down the stretch of the season, but I think overall it galvanizes the fans. I tweeted out, I was so fired up afterwards. I tweeted out, "I'm with him, Bobby," after Ryan did his thing, because I think it does. If you watch this team and you know what this organization's about, they're no different than every other team. They're looking to try to get an advantage, but I do really respect wholeheartedly the way that Will Hardy's approached this. It's not an easy thing for a coach to go through. And, he's made it about business. He's made it about getting better. He's tried to really establish a culture, which I think, play hard and passes are those famous words. And if this team isn't that, I don't know what they are. This team plays hard. They play together. They're not always necessarily in the right spots, and there's guys that are still on that learning track. But, Will Hardy has that locker room, and that was the goal.
I don't necessarily want to burst Jazz fans' bubble. I get it. I do think the level of defense they played after 3 games with Jaren Jackson Jr. is slightly inflated. I think everybody was excited. I think it's the dog days of the NBA. I think they played some particularly mediocre or outright lousy opponents. So the defensive numbers are going to look really good, though I do think Jaren Jackson Jr. is going to make a big impact. Do you think they will be dramatically better next year defensively, or do you think this was kind of a temporary boost that they were riding off of a high of getting Jaren Jackson Jr. in the building for the first time?
I think there's probably a little of both, but I do believe it's going to be vastly improved. You just improve so much by personnel, and if the Jazz have Walker Kessler and are able to anchor the middle with him, and then Jaren being able to be that kind of silent issue from the weak side that exists, and another huge body that you've got to navigate, but also very switchable guy, which is so good for a defense. I think, the added experience and off season for Ace will make him better. His instincts to guard are really good. And he's actually done a nice job in a lot of isolation situations against a NBA scorer, and done a nice job at just doing the right things and, not fouling. That's probably the area for him. He needs to get more disciplined on that. Leaves his feet a little bit, on shot fakes and reaches. So just becoming more sound. And then I do believe Keontae's about it. I watched it this year. That dude, he transformed a lot of things, but his defensive understanding, effort, want to, detail, all that stuff's gotten so much better. So yeah, I think they're going to be vastly improved, but at the same time, vastly improved to be 15th in the league. And so there's always going to be work to do.
Jazz are sitting on 18 wins. How many do they have by the end of the season?
It's so hard for me to know because of what you just said. The irony of all this is Sacramento may have put the worst lineup I've ever seen in the history of man out that night. JP was doing the game with me, JP Chunga, who calls the Stars games, and he filled in for Jake Scott. But I said, seriously, JP, me, you, Jamil, Ron Boone, and David Locke. I think we get this one. I think we do.
I'm going to pencil in 23. I had 22 early.
Oh, yeah, I'm going to let you do that because I'm.
Yeah, sure. I get it.
I have the hardest time even knowing, I get there, I'm like, I wonder what's going to happen tonight.
All right, Coach, we appreciate you jumping on. Enjoy your All-Star break, and we'll listen to you on the other side.
All right. You're the best. Thanks.
There he is, Coach Tim LaComb, jumping on, talking a little Jazz basketball with us. And I promise you I will get into we'll get into it now. We can get into the $500,000 fine right now. We've got no reason not to get into that. We got a little bit of time left in this segment. So I understand the NBA's decision. I understand the NBA drawing a line and saying enough is enough. Today is the day we are going to start enforcing these rules, and we are sick of teams blatantly shirking their responsibility of winning games. And that's what we want the NBA to be about. And if you say that this is going to be the point moving forward where that's all going to change, and the Jazz, unfortunately, and now the Indiana Pacers are going to be a part of it as well. And now that's going to change, and from here on out, every team that we think breaks those rules is going to face a hefty fine, and if we do it aggressively enough between now and the end of the season, it can change going forward. I'm actually in full support of that. I hope the NBA does do that. I hope the NBA does come out and start punishing teams who are trying to do that. I have very serious doubts that that's going to be the case.
They have such a strong track record of doing that, right?
Yeah, right.
Not singling teams out.
That's
right.
my problem, is that the NBA has clearly not consistently punish teams who are not trying to win games. And so I'll pull up this.
Do you remember how much they got fined last year for what they did with Lowry?
150?
It was a much smaller fine. And how many other teams did they fine?
A couple of
Last
teams
year.
have picked up fines. I think the Wizards might have picked up one last year at some point. I know the Cavs got fined earlier this year. It has happened at times, clearly.
But it's not every single time that a team makes up an injury to sit a star player.
No, it's...
And I think that's the frustrating part.
Absolutely, no question about it. No, what is happening right now with the NBA, and the reason why Jazz fans feel picked on, is because this does feel somewhat at random. I mean, this does feel somewhat like the league is making up their rules as they go along. Again, I don't have a problem if the NBA is going to start finding teams that they label as going into games or playing games with the intent to lose. But intent is such a dangerous word, in my opinion, and it is such a Pandora's box for the NBA to get into, because define intent for me, and define intent when the Jazz got fined for winning a basketball game. So here's the logic that I have a hard time finding of what the NBA is doing. If you want to fine them for the Magic and say the intent is to lose that game, fine, you lost the game. You fine a team for winning a game in Miami where the Jazz second unit outscored the Miami Heat in the fourth quarter of the game the Jazz were intending to lose by the NBA's definition. So what the NBA is telling you is they would rather you lose a game with your starters on the floor than win a game with a different lineup. Let me say that again. The Jazz would not have gotten fined for the Miami game if Jaren Jackson Jr. and Lauri Markkanen had played in the fourth quarter. So by definition, the NBA would rather you lose a game with your starters on the floor than win with your bench. So the NBA would prefer a team losing than winning if they think the intent was not to win that game. It's a logical hypocrisy that doesn't really make a lot of sense when you're trying to get rid of teams tanking. Teams tanking is teams losing games. That's what tanking is. We know that. Tanking is losing games. The Jazz win. The NBA says, that's wrong. You should lose with your starters. That's better. We won't fine you if you lose with your starters versus winning with your bench. If it had just been the Orlando game the Jazz got fined, I would have said, great. That makes total sense to me. But now you're telling teams that they're better off throwing a game or losing a game with starters on the floor than your bench on the court late in the game. Okay? Now tell me, where does that line start? At what point do I have to have my starters back on the floor? How long do I have to keep them on the floor? Because the Jazz aren't going to get fined for not having Lauri Markkanen and Jaren Jackson Jr. on the floor against the Sacramento Kings, because the NBA is going to deem that that game was already not in question by the time the fourth quarter came around. Okay, tell me what the score and time has to be before I can pull my starters. You have to tell me, because I saw Tracy McGrady score 13 points in 35 seconds to erase an 8-point lead. If San Antonio had pulled their starters in that game where they're up 8 with 30 seconds to go, does that not show intent to lose the game? They lost the game. If they were to have pulled Tim Duncan off the floor, or Bruce Bowen off the floor, or Tony Parker off the floor, Manu Ginobili off the floor, if Greg Popovich at that point had said, there's 30 seconds left, we got this game wrapped up, and they lose, do we need to fine the San Antonio Spurs for losing that game? It happened earlier this year. The Minnesota Timberwolves were up 8 with 50 seconds to go. They lose a game to the Sacramento Kings, or to the Phoenix Suns. If Chris Finch had pulled Rudy Gobert off the floor in that game, which, by the way, I've seen him do it, when they're up big and they've lost games because Rudy Gobert wasn't on the floor, they play bad defense as a result. Not on purpose. Of course it's not on purpose. That wasn't their intent, but they lost. But how do I define intent in that situation? You made a coaching decision that lost a game. Is that not intent? Will Hardy made a coaching decision and the Jazz won the game. Is that not intent? And if you're going to say, well, I know it when I see it, that's too vague. If you're going to find teams by I know it when I see it, that's a real problem the NBA is going to try and run into. And from here on out the rest of the season, you're going to have every Jazz fan tweeting at the NBA every single time a team loses a game when it can be deemed that they maybe didn't have the intent to win it. So now Memphis, Dallas, Sacramento, the Jazz, obviously, the New Orleans Pelicans, who can't win a game despite the fact that they don't need to, the Indiana Pacers, the Brooklyn Nets. Do they have to keep their starters on the floor all game? What point is a game unwinnable? What are you actually trying to say here, NBA? Because you said that the Jazz couldn't lose to the Sacramento Kings, so they're not going to be fined for not playing Lauri Markkanen and Jaren Jackson Jr. down the stretch. The Jazz did beat Miami. They outscored Miami in the fourth quarter, and the NBA decided that that was wrong, that Will Hardy doesn't have the ability, doesn't have the authority, doesn't have the agency to be able to make that decision. What happens when an NBA coach is so sick of his starters not doing what is asked of them that he pulls them in the fourth quarter to make a statement? You guys aren't trying hard enough? The only way I can punish you, I can't fine you. That's not within my power as a head coach. So I'm going to bench you, and I'm going to make a statement that you guys aren't playing well enough. If Lauri Markkanen misses 3 defensive rotations, which, by the way, happens every game, and Will Hardy wants to punish him and doesn't play him in the fourth quarter, and the Jazz lose a game, and Will Hardy's sending a message to Lauri Markkanen that you either got to play harder or you're not going to play, does the NBA get to step in and fine the Utah Jazz for losing that game because Lauri Markkanen's not on the floor? Intent? How do you know what Will Hardy's intent is? How can you show and prove what Will Hardy's intent is? I saw Luke Walton do that. I remember because it was Lonzo Ball's birthday. Everyone was excited about him being a young rookie on the team. This young Lakers starting lineup that had, I think, Julius Randle and Lonzo Ball and might have had Brandon Ingram already at that point. And they're playing poorly. And Luke Walton benches the entire starting lineup for the scrubs coming off the bench on an already bad team and says, yeah, that's the message. I'm sending it to you, and we're going to lose the game. The next time a coach does that, are we fining them? Because how do you define intent in that situation? The intent there for Luke Walton was not to put the best team on the floor to win the game. It was to send a message to his players. Can that not be an intent you have as a head coach anymore? Can you not send a message? Does the only message have to be, how do we win every second we're on the game or in the game? And at what point do you draw the line there? Again, give me a score and give me a time. Is it 10 points with 5 seconds left? Or do starters just have to be on the floor every game? Because at what point, the Jazz erase a 29-point lead against the Denver Nuggets in the late 90s. Okay? If that's 18 in the fourth quarter and they don't play, that's a winnable game. Teams erase double-digit leads in the fourth quarter all the time. I don't know what Pandora's box the NBA is trying to open with this intent rule. And the logic of you're better off losing with starters because fans like to see it than winning and making a competitive game with the bench doesn't make any sense to me.
It's also hard because, you heard Will Hardy after the game last night talking about Lauri Markkanen being on a minutes restriction. And we know that's a very real thing. He missed, I think it was 7 games because of a very real illness. He talked about it in a media availability. He was sick, and he is still recovering. That was less than 2 weeks ago, by the time of the Magic game. It had not been 2 weeks since coming back from that illness. Jaren Jackson Jr. had a tumor in his knee that he was playing on. So it is a very real thing that those players were on minutes restrictions. So who gets to decide when those minutes are played? Whether all of those 25 minutes are played before the fourth quarter, or do they need to log minutes in the fourth quarter? And it's all blurring the lines of who gets to make that decision outside of the coach. Why can't Coach Hardy make those decisions?
Who has agency? Who has agency to make decisions? If it's not the head coach, who is it? That's the head coach's job. That's why you have a head coach. If the NBA wants to just say the starters have to play from the 12-minute mark to the 6-minute mark of the first quarter of every game, and they have to play the 6-minute mark to the end of or to the beginning of halftime in the second quarter, and then the first 6 of the third quarter and the final 6 of the fourth quarter, is that where we're headed? I mean, what is the NBA going to? What rule is the NBA going to start enforcing here? Does it have to be 2 players? Does it have to be 1 player? Does it have to be 5 players? You know, who does have to be on the floor? If Ace Bailey gets hot and is out playing Jaren Jackson Jr. in a game, can Ace Bailey not play over Jaren Jackson Jr.? If Kyle Filipowski is a matchup nightmare for the opposing team and the Jazz are better off with him on the floor than Lauri Markkanen, can he not be on the floor? Because that's what the NBA is punishing the Jazz for. Now, you can say the Jazz's intent was to lose the game. Okay, then why wasn't Oscar Tshiebwe out there? Why wasn't Blake Hinson making his NBA debut? Why wasn't Elijah Harkless out there in Miami? You know, why weren't the Jazz trying hard? If the intent was to lose, why didn't the Jazz actually try harder to lose that game?
Why didn't they bench them earlier?
Okay, and now let's flip this. And I'm going to go a little long here, but let's flip this. If Tom Thibodeau plays his starters 40 minutes a game, and I'm a head coach and I play mine 32, do I not think that Tom Thibodeau has more intent to win that game than I do? Clearly he does. He's playing his better players more than I'm playing. That's the problem the NBA is saying the Utah Jazz had, that the Miami Heat played their starters more than the Jazz did. So the Jazz are going to play, or the Jazz are going to pay a $250,000 fine, because a $500,000 fine for doing it twice, just split it up, $250,000 each time. That's what the NBA is saying. So if Tom Thibodeau goes into a game with more intent to win, because he's going to grind his players to dust by playing them 42 minutes a night, is that more intent than the Utah Jazz? Define it for me. I need to know, in all honesty. And then, back to your point, Christian. What if a player has an injury or an illness, like Lauri Markkanen or like Jaren Jackson Jr., and the medical professionals come in and say, it's probably not good to play him for 6 minutes, let him cool off, and then try and restart him again. Maybe it's an ankle. Maybe it's a knee. Maybe it's an illness. Maybe it says once he gets going, it's better to just let him go because he's not going to be able to bounce back from cold if he hasn't recently stretched. There was a Jazz player, formerly, this is before your time, Christian, named Randy Foye. Randy Foye was a terrible bench player. He was a good starter. I don't know what it was. I don't know why that was the case. He couldn't come off the bench. When he came off the bench, his numbers dropped dramatically. But he liked to start. And when he started, whether it was he was hot or he was warmed up from shooting and shoot-around, and then he played in the starting lineup, but the Jazz didn't always close games with him because he wasn't the best player on the team, but he was far better if he started the game than didn't close the game. Okay, now you're defining who's starting and who's finishing. If Randy Foye's not on the floor, is that a problem now for the NBA? He was better as a starter, but he wasn't great in the fourth quarters. He wasn't a very good defensive player, but the Jazz got more out of him by playing him early in games than late. Rodney Hood has all kind of anxiety issues. Rodney Hood gave Donovan Mitchell his first start because he started throwing up before the opening night of the first game of Donovan Mitchell's career and had to be pulled. After being announced in the starting lineup, Rodney Hood then was not on the floor. So if a guy in the fourth quarter gets anxious, can't get on the floor, can't get on the court, but there's no definable injury, what, are you drawing the line there? Does he have to be out there? Does the coach not get to make that decision? Does the coach not have that ability to choose anymore what he thinks is best for his team? And if you want to say, well, intent matters more than results, then stop counting wins and losses. If intent matters, reward teams for the intent of winning and not winning games. Indiana Pacers, give them a championship. They intended to win that game. I'm sorry, they didn't. But the intention matters more. They intended to win. The Jazz intended to lose. That matters more than the Jazz's actual result of winning the game, according to the NBA. The logic doesn't make sense, and I don't think it's actually something the NBA can enforce, and it's certainly not something they're going to be willing to enforce. And I think that's what would scare me if I'm an NBA fan and if I'm a Jazz fan. Because why are you picking on the Utah Jazz if that's the case? If from here on out, I need to eat these words and the NBA finds everybody, if the Sacramento Kings come out of a week-long break and all these guys who have minor injuries don't play and they don't get fined $150,000, Jazz fans should be livid. If they do, great. If the NBA starts finding those teams and it makes a better product, I'd love that because I do cover the NBA and I do watch it as a fan. So I would love to see it. But I have my doubts. And until then, Jazz fans are going to feel singled out. Pacers fans will feel singled out. And I think they have a right to feel that way. All right, when we come back, top 3 stories at KSLSports.com. Stick around. Jake and Ben, 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone.
It's time to break down the biggest stories of the day. This is the top 3 stories of the day on KSLSports.com. On 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone.
Jake and Ben, 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone. Very happy Friday to everybody out there. Hope some of you have a long weekend ahead of you with President's Day on Monday. Hope you have a wonderful Valentine's Day. It's not too late to go check out our friends at J. Brooks Jewelers. J. Brooks, cherish your loved ones with J. Brooks Jewelers. Explore their expertly crafted engagement rings made from the finest materials. J. Brooks Jewelers. Find them online, jbrooksjewelers.com. All right, Christian, where are we starting today?
Number 1, All-Star Weekend kicks off tonight for the NBA. Funny enough, all of Utah's representation will be playing tonight. That's Taylor Frankie Paul in the Celebrity All-Star Game first, and then Ace Bailey in the Rising Stars Challenge.
Sean East, also a member of the Salt Lake City Stars, will be in the Rising Stars Challenge. And then actually on Sunday, you do have a chance to see Blake Hinson play in the G League Next Up All-Star Game. Blake Hinson made his debut last night for the Utah Jazz. In fact, made his NBA debut last night for the Utah Jazz. So he had 11 points. He played well. Credit to Blake Hinson. Nice.
So he still qualifies for that?
I think he's still going to be on the team. I think he's still going to be playing. Maybe he gets pulled. I don't know. I did not see an update that he had been withdrawn because he's on a 2-way contract. But yes, you will see Ace Bailey tonight. I want to quickly adjust. I think yesterday when we talked about this, I think I said the game is at 5. The game is at 7 tonight. The Rising Stars Challenge is at 7 tonight. I do think Taylor Frankie Paul makes her NBA debut at 5 o'clock tonight.
Yes, that's
I think
true.
the celebrity game on Peacock is at 5 o'clock. I think it's Peacock. And then the Rising Stars Challenge with with Ace Bailey is going to be tonight at 7 o'clock, again on Peacock. You can watch it that way. The Rising Stars Challenge is probably somehow the worst game played during All-Star Weekend. It is a bunch of players who are, excited to be there, but no one's really trying hard to win because nobody ever really tries hard to win in these games. And it's particularly disjointed. I think it is really difficult because a lot of guys fly in this morning. Ace may have flown to L.A. last night, but guys get there, they do their thing, and then they go out on their vacations. Ace Bailey will be playing for Team Mello, that features, which actually is kind of cool. Carmelo Anthony is not totally dissimilar from Ace Bailey, or at least what we thought the archetype of Ace Bailey was going to be. Ace is different. He's a much better defensive player. He's not that good of a scorer, clearly. Not because Ace isn't going to be a great scorer, but Melo came in and I think averaged 20 points per game his first season in the NBA and helped lead the Denver Nuggets to the playoffs. But also playing on Team Melo are Reed Shepherd, Steph Castle, Jeremiah Fears, Donovan Clingan, who we saw last night, and Colin Murray Boyles. So not a bad roster. We'll see how they go tonight. I still think they're doing the did I not say Dylan Harper? Yes, teammate Dylan Harper as well. Yes, that's correct. I think they're still doing the round-robin format with 4 teams, 3 teams made up of sophomores and juniors, and the G League team. And actually, the G League team is sprinkled in there as well. So you can watch that tonight with, I think it's first team to 25 points wins those games. Again, on Peacock tonight. All right, what's number 2?
Number 2, Team USA Hockey makes their first appearance in the Milan Olympics yesterday. Quite the scorcher, Ben. They beat Latvia 5-1.
A little clunky out of the gates, 1-1 through the first period, and it kind of looked like after Canada had absolutely hammered Czechia 5-0, you thought, oof, is this a different caliber of team? Is Team USA not going to be able to hang when they're tied 1-1? It just didn't look particularly good, I didn't think, in the first period. And then the floodgates opened, and they looked incredible, and they dominated. And I do think, hopefully, we are steamrolling towards a matchup between Team USA and Canada in the gold medal game.
That is the thought. It is, yeah. I mean, Team USA had 2 goals overturned in the first period as well. But it's a very interesting contrast of styles of play between Canada and Team USA, like what they're wanting to do, right? Canada is just all about finesse and high-powered offense, and they can outskate anybody. Team USA, it really looks like they're going to try to go with, bully hockey and try pushing people around. And they got the Tkachuk brothers on the first line. And it could be fun. And I really, truly hope that this lives up to all the expectations that have been set, not just leading up to the Olympics, but even going back to the Four Nations face-off last year with all the drama.
They've outlawed fighting at the Olympics. You can't fight in hockey. I will honestly be curious how they police physical play at the net and the physical play of the Kachuk brothers in this type of game. Does it rattle the other teams because they're not expecting it, or does it increase the physicality across all of the games? So that will be fun to watch. Germany also won. J.J. Peterka, a Utah Mammoth player, picked up an assist in that game. Clayton Keller did not play for Team USA yesterday. He was the healthy scratch among the forwards on the team. So we will see if he's able to get into any of these games, but he was not on the depth chart, which I think we had kind of projected for a while. But earlier this week, kind of out of nowhere, it looked like maybe he was going to be playing on that second line, and then that quickly that disappeared. So keep an eye on that.
We know he has chemistry with Tage Thompson, right, and some of these other guys. I mean, they all know each other.
Yeah.
They've all been friends for a long time. So Clayton Keller is not going to be a healthy scratch every single game.
I don't think so.
No, he's going to get on the ice at some point. We'll see if he makes the most out of that.
All right, what's next?
Number 3, the Jazz fined $500,000. That's FINED. They had to give it away. They didn't gain $500,000.
Jazz fans, you don't need to own this. This is not your $500,000. You don't need to feel guilty about it. You don't make the decisions of who plays and who doesn't. And I will tell you, you've been brainwashed a little bit to root for the team to lose. Like, the truth is, it is the right strategy. What the Jazz are doing by the NBA's current structure, apparently not the rules. Apparently the Jazz are breaking the rules, but the structure does say you should be doing exactly what the Jazz are doing. I do think Jazz fans feel guilty about it for some reason. Like, I saw it last night. Like, woe is me. It's like, it's not you. It is your team. But, like, you didn't lose money last night. And, you know, I saw Ryan Smith respond to Bobby Marks and saying he had amnesia and saying his amnesia was hilarious from earlier this week. But it's not your money. Ryan Smith can afford it. You know, the Jazz did just sell Jock Landale to the Atlanta Hawks, I would imagine, for at least $500,000. Like, fine, you put that into the coffer, and then that pays off the NBA fine. Whatever. I went over it a little bit in the last segment. There is a great irony on the actual press release the NBA had that contradicts itself. And I will read it for you really quickly. So the Jazz got fined for not playing Jaren Jackson Jr. or Lauri Markkanen in the fourth quarters games, right? The minutes police came for the NBA. The NBA, in the same release, also fined the Indiana Pacers $100,000. It said the Pacers, in the same release, could have played under the medical standard in the policy, including by playing reduced minutes. And they could have avoided the fine. The NBA, in the same release, they fined the Jazz for playing their players reduced minutes, said the Pacers could have avoided a fine, by the way, in a game against the Utah Jazz, had they played these stars, Pascal Siakam, in reduced minutes. So the Jazz got dinged for playing reduced minutes, and then in the literal next paragraph, the NBA said, well, we wouldn't have fined you, Pacers, if you'd played your stars, reduced minutes.
Because Pascal missed that game.
Pascal didn't play at all.
So, right. So they're saying it's better to play him just a little bit.
Just a little. And avoid the fine than not play him at all. And the Jazz say, cool, deal. And they say, ooh, but you played him the wrong minutes. Again, I'm not trying to sound like an alarmist. I do think there is an ability, if you want to go in and say, like, look, there's a clear line, this is this, that is that, and we think we can do it on a night-to-night basis. Intent is going to be really hard to prove. Those types of things, what minutes you play a player is going to be really hard to prove. Are you going to call the coach on the phone and ask, why didn't you play him in the fourth quarter? And if he says, injury report, he's on a minutes restriction, I played him 25 minutes early, and I thought if we could build a lead early, we could coast to a victory, that's our best bet? Or do I have to say, hey, I'd rather give up a 20-point lead. I'd rather be down 20 going into the fourth quarter and then have Lowry play then. And that gives us the best chance to win? It's going to be hard for the NBA to figure that out. And they better be ready to find a bunch of people because you're just going to have to eradicate all of it. You're just going to have to go scorched earth. If the NBA actually wants to fix this problem, you do have to find the teams that every player misses for lower back soreness. If Zach LaVine doesn't play for tightness in his lower back, in his hamstrings, got to find him. If you can't be selective in how you're picking this if you actually want to get rid of the problem because the teams are rewarded too much for tanking. The teams get too much out of losing games and getting a high draft pick. So you've got to just absolutely go out there and burn the entire thing to the ground and say you've got to play all your players. You've got to play them every game. And if you don't, you're facing a huge fine. And it's just not going to be worth it for you to own an NBA team because we're going to eat into so much of your profit. You're not going to be able to make a dollar.
The funny thing about that is that would be the ideal. Like, people are coming up with all these crazy ways to fix tanking or whatever. That's how you do it. That's how you stop this problem that Kawhi Leonard started 10 years ago.
Yeah,
when
and the Spurs started 20 years before that.
Right, and all this load management stuff. That's how you solve this. But you're right, Ben. Nobody's going to sit around and, number one, want to go through all the injury reports and double, check and verify which injuries are real and which injuries are fake. And the teams aren't going to want to respond to that. And the players are going to be upset when they are forced to play more than 65 games a season, because right now that's the minimum for the awards, right? So they want to at least hit that. But if you're making these guys play 75, 80 games, they're not going to be happy. So the fans and the NBA would be happy with that. Then the players get angry.
Yeah, I honestly don't know how you fix it. And the problem with what the NBA has done is they've let it get to this point. I mean, this is the real problem. And they're pretending like this is – look, maybe it has reached a fever pitch. I mean, maybe this is the worst it's ever been. I would listen to that. But the NBA is to blame for it getting here. Like, the NBA letting it get to this point before it says, okay, now we're going to start punishing teams, that's the NBA's fault. They have let this go unchecked for so long. They let the Oklahoma City Thunder build 65% of their championship roster by tanking. They just allowed it to happen. They let the Spurs do it through tanking with Victor Wembanyama. They let Kawhi Leonard not playing games for load management. They tanked for Tim Duncan. I mean, again, this has been going on for so long. I think that is why Jazz fans feel picked on. You're not being picked on if they do it to everybody, but now the NBA better start doing it to everybody. Because if you want to talk about the integrity of the game and the intent to win every night you step on the floor, I'll give you a list of 5 games next Thursday when the NBA returns that don't meet that criteria. And you've got to find those teams as well. Otherwise, Jazz fans, Indiana Pacers fans, and everybody, if you're just a casual fan who wants to see fairness applied across the league, should be frustrated with Adam Silver in the NBA. And I've liked Adam Silver. I've tried to give him the benefit of the doubt. He's had more failures than he has had successes so far. He's made everyone really rich. He's made the players way more money than ever before. He's made the owners way more money before, and they will like that. He let the fox into the hen house with gambling. It's a part of this problem. But, man, he is not fixing the league's issues. He's making people rich, but he's not making the product better. And in that sense, I wonder how quickly everyone's going to start turning on him, because you hear it boiling up. You hear it coming through that Adam Silver's losing control of his league. And I have a hard time disagreeing.
David Locke was on with DJ and PK this morning. He made an excellent point, I think, pointing this out. The only reason the NBA is doing anything right now is because Adam Silver has to have a press conference in 2 days.
And has to be able to say, I did something about it.
Where he has to sit up there and be able to say that he did something, because he is going to get bombarded by questions about how you handle this, because it has been a conversation all week with the Utah Jazz, going back to what Bobby Marks said. And so, yeah, this is basically a PR move of, what can I say that I did? Even if it doesn't end up fixing anything, I have to say that I did something before I have to speak to the media.
I'm not going to be at All-Star Weekend. Jazz don't have any representatives. I'm not going to be there. I wish I would, because I would love to ask Adam Silver, how do you pick who you're finding here? How do you define intent? And is there a way? How are you finding a team for winning a game? I hope somebody presses the NBA on it. And look, there have been people who have come out and had the Jazz's back outside of the state of Utah. Tom Haberstroh came out and said this is something the Toronto Raptors have been doing for all of last season. They sat Scotty Barnes down the stretch in games, not down entire games, down the stretch of actual games that were clutch games. They took their all-star off the floor to lose, and the NBA didn't bat an eye. I've told you, I watched the Brooklyn Nets do it with Ben Simmons. Now, if you say Ben Simmons isn't a star, fine, but the intent wasn't to win. Jordy Fernandez pulling Ben Simmons wasn't because he thought they were going to have a better chance to win with him off the floor here in Utah. It's because they wanted to lose the game, and they succeeded. So the NBA hasn't enforced this rule before. Are they going to start now? And if so, great. I hope they do, because it would make the product better. But picking it here and there does nothing for the integrity of the NBA. It does nothing for proving that you actually want to see teams open nights with an intent to win. All right, we'll look at All-Star Weekend coming up next. Stick around. Jake and Ben, 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone.
Whether it's the Jazz, Utes, Cougars, or Aggies, these guys have got you covered.
Time to eat, fellas.
You're locked on to Jake Scott and Ben Anderson.
1, 2, 3, move it.
On 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone.
Jake and Ben, 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone. KSL Sports Zone and Beehive Meals are honoring people that impact youth sports in the communities. Nominate the youth sports volunteer that you know for the Beehive Meals Hero of the Week at kslsports.com/contest. And listen every Thursday afternoon to JJ and Alex for the winners, the Beehive Meals Hero of the Week. Go check out online, kslsports.com/contest. Quick NBA news. Future first ballot Hall of Famer, and apparently one of the worst teammates of all time, with all due respect. Chris Paul has announced he's retiring. He got waived by the Toronto Raptors this morning. He was acquired several moves at the trade deadline. And announced, this is it. He says, after over 21 years, I'm stepping away from basketball. As I write this, it's hard to really know what to feel, but for once, most people would be surprised I don't have the answer. Mostly filled with so much joy and gratitude, this chapter being the NBA player is done. It gave up basketball will forever be ingrained in my DNA and my life. Chris Paul obviously has very close, or has a weird relationship with the state of Utah, was kind of the consensus guard to take in the draft in 2005 until a late push by Darren Williams in Illinois, going to the national championship game. Put Darren in that similar conversation. Chris Paul had some issues on the floor during his time at Wake Forest, including punching Julius Hodge in the groin. And the Jazz decided to go with Darren Williams over Chris Paul, which, in retrospect, was a clear and obvious mistake. Darren Williams was a good player. Darren Williams, I think you can argue, for a couple of seasons, might have been the best point guard in the NBA. He was better than every other point guard every time he stepped on the floor, including head-to-head matchups with Chris Paul. But Darren Williams retired with a good, but not all-time career, 3 All-Star appearances, 2 All-NBA appearances, while Chris Paul, and by the way, Darren retired, let me see if I can find this. Darren retired in 2017. Chris Paul played nearly a decade longer, ended up at 12 All-Star games, 11 All-NBA, 9 All-Defensive teams. Was on the NBA's 75th anniversary team, 6-time steals champ. Chris Paul absolutely deserves credit as one of the great point guards in NBA history, and a far better career than Darren Williams. Now, would Chris Paul have stayed longer in Utah than Darren? I don't know. Probably not. He didn't stay particularly long in New Orleans either. Now, the Jazz are a far better product and a far better organization than New Orleans, so maybe he would have felt more at home here. I don't know. Again, I don't think anyone who had Chris Paul on their team over the last decade of his career particularly enjoyed the experience, whether it was the franchise or the team or his teammates. He was not really beloved in locker rooms, and as we saw it kind of come to a head finally with the Los Angeles Clippers, Ty Lue, who's a good coach, said, we are better off having you off the team than you giving another piece of advice to me or anybody else on how to run this roster.
Well, and if Chris Paul was on the Jazz in the late aughts and Kobe Bryant tried to trade for him, Kamish probably lets that one go through.
Yeah, probably figures out how to get that one to go because the NBA is not controlling the Utah Jazz at that point. So an interesting career. Another part of this aspect is the Jazz ended Chris Paul's original run with the Clippers by beating them with Gordon Hayward and Rudy Gobert and Joe Johnson in that, I believe, 2017 playoff run that blew up the Lob City Clippers, and Chris Paul ended up moving over to the Houston Rockets after that. So tip of the cap to Chris Paul on what was undoubtedly a strange but very well-decorated NBA career. Quickly, we'll look at the All-Star participants. Truthfully, most NBA fans aren't going to know who anybody in the dunk contest is, which has been the problem. I mean, a G Leaguer has been winning the dunk contest each of the last 3 years. He won it 3 times in a row, and Mac McClung. Mac McClung is not participating this season. Carter Bryant, rookie from the San Antonio Spurs, will be in it. Jackson Hayes, it's going to be hard to watch. Yes, he can do a lot of dunks. He is so floppy as a player, it's not going to look good. His dunks, I don't think, are going to look particularly good. Keyshawn Johnson for the Miami Heat, who nobody's ever heard of, with all due respect to Keyshawn. And then who I think is going to win, Jace Richardson from the Orlando Magic. Little guy, and his dad is Jason Richardson, who is a former NBA dunk champ. Your three-point shooting contest participants, Devin Booker from the Phoenix Suns, Con Knippel from the Charlotte Hornets. Dame coming back despite being injured. He's going to play on that torn Achilles because he has won it 3 times in his career. Tyrese Maxey from the Philadelphia 76ers. Former Jazz man Donovan Mitchell. Jamal Murray, the Denver Nuggets. Bobby Portis Jr. of the Milwaukee Bucks, which is the most him of this list. And Norman Powell from the Miami Heat. Give me Con Knippel. Loved Con before the draft. I think he's been really fun. I think he's exactly what teams are looking for when they draft, and he's helped lift Charlotte out of treachery for the last several seasons. So shout out to Con Knippel. He's who I'm picking to win the three-point shooting contest. All right, we'll get back to the Jazz getting fined, including we got some call-ins. Some people wondering about what's going on with the NBA. We'll let you hear those coming up next. Stick around. Jake and Ben, 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone.